What up, guys? The Bench Buddies are back with another top 25 rankings for college basketball, and it's week 13 already as we're kicking off February slate. We got about 6 weeks left till March Madness starts, so lots to go on here for college basketball as teams are going to start making those pushes. But here we're going to start with the teams that are kind of struggling right now. Maybe we jumped the gun a little bit on Florida State there last week. They were rallying off some good wins, but just lost two games this week that they shouldn't have lost. Davidson lost that game to VCU at home, so it's kind of a split there. And then the other two, LSU and Xavier, those could be some big fraud teams coming up to play here.
Man, we got an interesting group here. We got 8 teams this week, which seems like a lot, but it's hard to take any of these teams off this list. First of all, you got Alabama and Oregon, two teams that can beat anybody or lose to anybody, especially Alabama with their crazy week. And then you got some really talented teams in LSU, Indiana, that could make some noise. And then the outsiders, Davidson, TCU, that no one's really talking about that are, quietly good teams.
I mean, I think, you can add Indiana to the mix as well there. They lost it to Michigan at home, and then they go out and beat Purdue literally, 2-3 days before. So
Yep.
I think all these teams here are capable of pulling off some big upsets, but it's more or less if they can contain themselves when they play, the teams they should beat. And a big opponent and a team that is like that is this 25th ranked Tennessee Volunteers team. Neither of us are, too impressed with this team still, but give them credit that they're still hanging in there and competing in the SEC. But the loss at Texas, they came back and then lost all that for nothing. And this week they should have two easier games, Texas A&M and South Carolina. Hopefully 16-6 going into next week.
All right, Iowa State slowly falling, but staying alive here at number 24. Big week for them. You get Kansas at home. That's a tough place to play at Iowa State. So that's a game they could definitely win. And then at Texas. But regardless of what happens, they've really held their own in the Big 12. They've proved they aren't frauds. Maybe they weren't a top 10 team like we had them earlier, but this is still a solid team that's going to be probably a 6 seed at worst in March.
23rd, we got the Colorado State Rams. Very ugly loss to UNLV's that dropped them. We were going to take them out, but just with so many other teams losing and that 16-2 record, I feel like, they deserve to stay. But at Wyoming versus San Diego State, two games that, could be really competitive for this team. And we'll see how they respond this week. But right now, I think this is still a really solid sleeper team going into March Madness around the 8, 9, 10 range seed-wise.
All right, Texas is back in at 22. Big win for them over Tennessee, but man, I watched the end of that game. That was ugly. Bailed out at the end by a really stupid foul by Tennessee. Otherwise, who knows what would have happened in overtime, but they couldn't score. This week, two more tough games at Texas Tech. Oh boy, you guys are going to want to tune into that one. Chris Beard returns to Texas Tech. Those fans are going to be after him. Should be interesting. But I would say 1-1 this week would keep them in the rankings, but they need more scoring and ball handling because that was ugly at the end.
21st, we have the Miami Hurricanes making a huge jump, mostly in part because they went 2-0 last week and other teams just kept losing. But this week you got a tough and it's a very surprising Notre Dame team this year at 14-6. They play Duke tonight. Could give them a run for their money again. And you got Virginia, who, I mean, the team that just kind of has fallen off the face of the earth this year, just, based off of recent past. But give this Miami team credit, sitting here at 16-5, picked in the bottom tier of the conference this year and really exceeding all expectations.
All right, a team no one really thought they'd see. We have Murray State coming in here at number 20. This team is 10-0 in conference play, 20-2, and one of those losses is at number 1 Auburn. So nothing to hang your head about there. They definitely deserve this ranking, in my opinion. Props to them. They've been scoring 100, seems like every other night in conference play. Joe Lenardi, I think, had him as a 10 seed, so he's starting to give him more respect in the bracket. But if they can run the table in conference play, regardless of what happens in their conference tournament, they should be able to get an at-large bid. by the end of the season. Could be a bid stealer.
At 19, we got Illinois, two ugly but wins last week, both by 1 point, I think. And the Northwestern game really showed having Kofi, it matters, because if they didn't have him that game, I think they would have got absolutely waxed. And the game before against Michigan State, somehow they play really good without Kofi. So I think this is the most inconsistent team in the Big Ten. Day in, day out, they could put up 70, or they could have a dud and put up 45. But tough test this week. Two tough games. Wisconsin has been the surprise team in the Big Ten this year, really clicking. And at Indiana, we've seen Purdue go in there and lose. So we'll see how it goes this week for this Illinois team. But I think this team, is still looking like a solid tournament team, though.
All right, Ohio State drops only one spot. Props to them. They had a great comeback against Purdue. Rallied all the way back to tie the game, and Jaden Ivey just broke their hearts at the end of the game. Tough way to lose there, but it really showed that they can compete with anybody, especially with that game being on the road. So I would think, if you're going to be as great as Ohio State wants to be, you got to go 2-0 this week. You got two mediocre teams coming into your building. They should win both of those games. But they proved to me, at least, that they have plenty of scoring outside of EJ Liddell, which I thought was their issue before that game. So going forward, I think they're a team to watch out for that no one's really talked about this year.
17th, we got the Texas Tech Red Raiders. The return of Chris Beard tomorrow night. Should be a great game there. And then you go on at West Virginia, a team that, has given this Texas Tech team and the Big 12 team some fits over the years. And I don't know, this Texas Tech team really looks pretty good, but then at some cases, they look really bad. So I think 17th right now is a very fair ranking. The Big 12, you really don't know who's going to even come in the top 5, it feels like. And we'll just see what they can do this week. And let's see if they, win both these games or potentially even lose them next week.
All right, UConn jumping up here to number 16. Two pretty easy games last week, but they took care of business going 2-0. And now that this team is healthy, they're a scary team. Definitely a top 3 team in their conference at worst. And they're a team no one's really going to want to play in March, because I don't think they'll be a top 4 seed. But they're definitely, they have the talent to be a top 4 seed. And this week going to Villanova, they're really going to show us what they really have in the tank. They've had some easy games the last 4 or 5. So if they can go in there and even compete with Villanova in their place, they're going to prove to a lot of people that they're going to be here to stay.
At 15th, we got USC taking a big step back. The loss at home against Stanford was a very surprising loss, but they still won 2 games this week against Arizona State and Cal. They played that same Arizona State team at their place this week, and at Arizona, another kind of fraud team, you could say, potentially. But I think this is going to be a big week for USC, and we're really going to see what kind of team they are. That 18-3 record could be a little bit deceiving through those 21 games, because they haven't really played fairly any good teams, and we saw what happened when they do play good teams. Doesn't really work out for them. So we're going to see if they can, step up to the challenge this week. And if not, this team could slowly be inching out of our rankings.
All right, Villanova slides up to number 14. Same with UConn, 2 pretty easy games last week, both at home against bottom tier Big East teams. But they got a tough week coming up. They go to Marquette, a team that already beat them in their place, and then they get UConn at home, who's been a really streaky team. So this week, if they can win both of those games, I think they're going to be borderline top 10. But outside of the Marquette game in the Big East, they've just been kind of coasting along, playing some really good basketball, shooting the ball really well. And, they're a team that no one's going to want to play in March. They never are. And they can really beat anybody in the country if they're shooting the lights out like they have plenty of times this year.
And at 13, we got Michigan State, huge win against Michigan. Really was a close game in the first half. Then I guess Max Christie took over, really dominated that game in the second half. And it doesn't help when helps Michigan State when Michigan really can't get anything going in the second half offensively. But that loss at Illinois against Kofi, or without Kofi, is a very questionable and could have hurt their Big Ten title chances. in the regular season with a loss like that. But they should rebound this week. 2 easy wins, I would say. I know it's at their place, but right now these Maryland and Rutgers are struggling in the bottom tier of the Big Ten. So I think Michigan State should get up to 18-4.
All right, Wisconsin here at number 12. Pretty easy week for them. Nebraska and Minnesota. Uh, Although they weren't exactly blowouts. Both of those games were somewhat competitive. This week, 2 tough ones at Illinois, never easy. And at Penn State, a team who's been playing a little better as of late in the Big Ten. So 2 pretty tough games there. But this team really has just surpassed everyone's highest expectations of them. I think in our Big Ten rankings, we both had them in the bottom half of the conference, maybe even lower than 8 or 9. So we're both surprised they're playing this well, and they've been able to sustain it all the way almost into February. So props to them, and going forward, they're a team to continue to watch out for.
At 11, we got Kansas. Great win at home against Texas Tech in OT, double OT. And then you come back at home against Kentucky and get absolutely waxed. What was it, 20 points at halftime, you're down. And the game, really, they started coming back in the second half, but then Kentucky just halted that huge run that they had and had their own little run. But really, this game was never a game. After the first 10 minutes, you could tell Kentucky absolutely dominated in every aspect. And now you've got at Iowa State, home against Baylor. So 4 straight ranked opponents you're playing. Definitely not an easy part of the schedule they got here. Tough draw. But I think once again, this Kansas team could go 1-1 this week and, maybe drop a few spots depending on who they win and lose to. But nothing to hang your head on if you're Kansas, just a tough draw for scheduling.
All right, Arizona takes a big fall from 3 to 10. UCLA pretty much wiped the floor with them at their place. Arizona, I've been really impressed with them all year, but I don't know if it was just because they couldn't shoot or what was the issue, but they just got dominated in that game. And it says a lot about them. They haven't played too many top tier teams. So when they finally do and you get blown out, you're going to move down quite a bit. But lucky for them, they got a chance to bounce back this week. They get UCLA again right away at their place, and then USC, the next 2 toughest teams in the conference. So win both of those, they'll move up quite a bit. But they got to figure themselves out because the Arizona State game was kind of a struggle as well.
And at 9, we got that Kentucky Wildcat team who absolutely destroyed Kansas. This week should have an easy win against Vanderbilt. And then the at Alabama game is always going to be tricky because who knows with that team. You could either blow them out by 20 or get blown out by 20, just with how inconsistent they have played. But give Calipari some credit. He's really took this team right where they're supposed to be right now. Preseason ranking, I believe, of 12, and here they are at 9. Really exceeding expectations and should be a scary team in March Madness.
All right, we got Baylor falling down to number 8 with a loss to Alabama where they kind of got dominated. I know they lost by, I think, 9, but the game was never really that close in the second half. But we've seen all year going to Alabama is not an easy game for any team, even the best in the country. So not a terrible loss. West Virginia at home should be an easy win against a reeling team. But at Kansas, they've proved that they are beatable in their place. However, never an easy game going into Allen Fieldhouse. So that'll be a big game for Baylor. And, this team slowly is not really being talked about by a lot of people after being thought of as the best team 2 or 3 weeks ago. So if they can beat Kansas, they'll be right back in that conversation.
At 7, a huge jump for these Providence Friars. I'm going to say it again, my sleeper team in this year's, field. Huge win at Xavier. You didn't think they could do it. And I did, and I just have all the faith in this team. They somehow find ways to win. And those 2 losses, one of them was a bad conference loss. The other one was an out of conference loss. And they should have 2 more easy wins this week, bottom tier teams in the Big East. So get to 20-2 and potentially you could be top 5 next week in our rankings. The AP poll just came out. They're at 15. So they're not showing the love to Providence. They must see something different than we do. But if you're looking at record and on-court play, how can you not put them in the top 10? They've just, been clicking on all cylinders recently. and they just continue and find ways to win.
All right, Houston here at number 6. And I think it's finally time to say that despite being without Marcus Sasser, this is still the same team that we thought they were before he got hurt. I mean, they went into UCF, borderline tournament team, and just dominated them at their place. And they've just dominated their way through the American. So this team, I think, is still Final Four ceiling, still a team to really watch out for in March. Despite losing their best player, they haven't really missed a beat at all. This week at Cincinnati could be a tough game, but the way Houston's playing, you got to roll with them in that game. And going forward, it's hard to see them losing another game in the American.
At 5, we got the Duke Blue Devils. The Louisville game was kind of sketchy a little bit, but Duke closed it out on an 11-0 run, I believe, to really solidify and win that game. And tonight they got at Notre Dame, which could be a very tricky game because Notre Dame came into their place and won. But I'm sure they're looking for revenge, and I think they'll be able to do it. But you still got to give that Notre Dame team some props for already beating Duke once and giving them one of their 3 losses this year. And then Saturday, you're going to Chapel Hill, really tough place to play, a huge rivalry. But this year, I think Duke has the upper hand. It's not even close. And I think Duke should win that one pretty easily. But hey, it's a rivalry. You never know what can happen in those games. And this 5th ranking right now could be in jeopardy just because, they got a team that's already beaten once this year and a rivalry game. So you never know what can happen.
Our UCLA jumps back to the top 5 after blowing out Arizona. And I just think getting Cody Riley back has been a huge boost for them. People didn't realize how much of an impact it was playing without him, as this is now pretty much the team that we thought they would be at the start of the season. They're not really missing a beat now. They just have so much scoring across the starting lineup and their bench with Peyton Watson, a stud freshman coming off the bench for them. So they're a really scary team. Final Four national championship ceiling. And, they go back to play a hungry Arizona team now at their place. But if they can get through that game, I think they're going to be a 1 seed in March and a scary team.
At 3, we got the Boilermakers of Purdue. Really dominated Iowa, I guess you could say. I don't know if it's complete domination, but they really showed that they were the better team. And Ohio State, this final score obviously was not as close as that game was played. Liddell, was probably kicking himself after he hits 2 threes in the final 5 seconds to give him a shot. And then Jaden Ivey does his thing, hits the game winner at home to really put the cherry on top of that win for Purdue. But they do definitely need to clean up some things, not letting teams get back in it after you're up 17 with 10 minutes to go in the game. At Minnesota versus Michigan, 2 tricky teams, I think, that could potentially upset Purdue. But I don't think it's going to happen, but they should be some good games at least. And Purdue will probably get to 20-3 after this week.
All right, Gonzaga holding steady at number 2. And like we've been saying the last few weeks, there's not going to be a ton of movement from Gonzaga the rest of the season. At BYU, I would say, is probably going to be their toughest game, really the rest of the season up until March Madness. That's their toughest road game they'll have in conference play. So if they can get through that game, I think they'll be at worst maybe 30-3 going into the tournament. I think they're pretty much a lock to be a 1 seed unless something crazy happens the rest of the year.
And at 1, of course, we get the Auburn Tigers. Missouri game, very, very sketchy. But how they respond with a complete blowout of Oklahoma at home, which is a very solid Oklahoma team with Porter Moser coaching. And now you got War Eagle versus Roll Tide tomorrow night, or Wednesday night. And I don't know how that game's going to go, in all honesty, because 1, it's a rivalry game. Alabama, they can upset you or get blown out by 20. And Auburn, we've seen them kind of play down to some teams' level recently. But that Georgia game should be an absolute blowout. But the Alabama game could be a tricky game. But I think even if you still lose that game, you might still have this number 1 ranking, depending how close or how you guys lose. But give this team credit. They just signed Bruce Pearl to an 8-year extension or something insane. So they obviously are trending in the right direction, not just this year, but for years to come. That's going to be it for our rankings video today. If you like this video, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Let us know what you guys thought about our rankings in the comments below. Hit that like button, get us to 100 subscribers. We're doing a giveaway. We're giving an autographed something away. That's a surprise. So once we hit there, we'll be picking a subscriber. But until the next time, the Bench Buddies are out.
She never called back.